On this episode of Come Pray With Me, I interview the musician Dovie Halpern. He will be sharing more about his musical project known as Hashem's Warrior.
My name is Dovie Halpern. I run a Jewish metalcore project called Hashem's Warrior, which literally means spiritual soldier. It is a kind of a confluence of my life experiences, both on the music and spiritual side.
So, what inspired you to go into your venture into the world of music?
Kind of a funny question, mostly because I was from pretty much my whole life and childhood not a musician. In fact, yet I would say my friend group was heavily consisted of musicians. I had a lot of friends in bands and really playing all kinds of music, from light rock to death metal, really, and everything in between. And so I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, which, according to some studies, actually is the music capital of planet Earth. Fun fact. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot. So growing up in Atlanta, I was influenced by a lot of kinds of music. For sure, hip hop has a huge scene there. But I myself was into music like so Eminem and like the southern hip hop, like Ludacris, and like the crunk scene and all that. That was all kind of going on when I was in high school in like the early mid 2000s. But when I left high school, I kind of went on my own. A lot of my friends went on to college in Atlanta, or frankly different places across America. I actually took a year to study abroad in Israel. For me, it was very much a kind of a spiritual search. To an extent, there was a program I went on for kids who just finished high school. So I wasn't sure how much I bought into it, or frankly, how much I was into religion at all. Having grown up religious and pretty much dropping everything by the time I realized I could without the world exploding. Like, you could say maybe eighth, ninth grade. I really just, whether it was, I grew up in a house that kept kosher. I grew up in a house that kept the Sabbath, and we went to synagogue every, on the Sabbath. And it just, for me, there was, I can't really put my finger on what was lacking, but I just felt for much of my life very, I guess the word is maybe apathetic. And I know I'm kind of giving a real roundabout answer to how did I get into music. But when I left town and I went to Israel, I really was the only one from my close knit group of friends, specifically for my friends with a music background, to do so. And I kind of, for giggles, brought a keyboard with me. And I said, you know what? Like, I don't know if I'm into this whole like religion thing. If I don't get anything out of this, I'll teach myself how to play this keyboard. And that's kind of funny, long story short, really the beginning of what transpired maybe 13 years later to actually releasing music that I don't know, people are seeming to like. And I this is all circa 2007, 2008. I actually went back for a second year to the same program in Israel, and then after that I went to college, started my career, took a gap year a few years into my career to go back to Israel another year. That one was really a pretty hardcore spiritual, like that one was more of not on a program. That was like, for the same reasons people go east and study in ashrams, that was like my real spiritual search on, like, is there something in this religion in which I was born into? Is there really something for me? Am I going to dedicate my life into this? Just kind of going through an identity crisis in my mid 20s. And I would say for sure the inspiration that you hear in my music, the inspiration that keeps my fire lit today, was very much fueled by this, I guess, more like personal quests, in which I headed again to Israel in would have been 2014, and I really got an opportunity to study under many like modern like mystics and spiritual masters with the Jewish mysticism, and in a lot of ways just I think learning what I would describe as a lot of the good stuff that you don't I just didn't get growing up in the system, and yeah, I think that my music, in a lot of sense, takes my influences of heavy metal, which I was very into in high school, and kind of noticing the confluence between screaming in prayer, especially when reading Psalms, and seeing how much it's about calling out, aka screaming, however you want to look at it, to God. That I really thought to myself for a second, hey, I mean, I don't know anything about the Christian metal scene, though I know it's quite extensive, but I thought, I'm Jewish. I never heard anything like this, especially in a religious sense. Why doesn't someone do something like this? And so that was kind of the seed planted that has transpired into what Hashem's Warrior is today, which is as far as I know, the first Jewish heavy metal project that's not like a gimmick of, hey, look at me, I'm Jewish, I'm also play heavy metal. Like that has existed before, but this is like actually an authentic expression of screaming from the soul in an attempt to just heal oneself and attach oneself to God.
That's pretty cool. That reminds me of the saying, sometimes I yell at God, and if I can't be myself with the Father, I'm going to stop preaching this sermon right now, which is from Sam Kinison. Before he got into comedy, he was a Baptist minister. Anyway, in what ways would you say that your faith influences the music you make?
Really good question. I mean, for me, I think part of my own journey as you could say, post high school person. When I say it like that, it's like I grew up in a small town. I went to a small elementary school, a small high school, like where everybody knew everyone. Like, really, when I left town, I was in so many ways just kind of embarking anew on an adventure in which I was able to kind of walk into a crowd of people that knew nothing about me, and so I could start from a blank slate. And so I kind of realized pretty early on that I didn't necessarily need to bring any of like my conceptions of who I am, who I have to be, how I have to act. I could really leave a lot of that behind. And it was really a clearing for me to discover a relationship with Hashem, which is what, in Jewish religion we call God. Discover a relationship with Hashem in a way that I really never had before. And let's be honest, I mean, just as a high school kid, I think I was probably looking to do anything and everything except be like self-reflective and spiritual. I played sports, I listened to music. Like I was looking to do anything I could do to just have a good time and be with friends and whatever. Like I think spirituality and a connection with Hashem was not exactly on the radar. So the fact that in my, let's say, late teens, early 20s, I was able to really kind of continue to like cut my teeth on a new lifestyle in new cities, around new people, and also kind of have my music and my keyboard playing to fall back onto. I, I think it just kind of went on through, in a lot of ways, hand in hand, of being kind of what again, what I call Hashem's warrior. It's just a Hebrew way of saying spiritual soldier, really. Um, and just being someone who, in the face of life's, ups and downs and the roller coaster that, especially of kind of going out in a new city, meeting new people, and just kind of, once I did that in Israel, I came back and I moved to New York, where I went to college, where I knew nobody, and so I had to do it again. And then after I finished college, I moved away from the five towns in New York where I lived to upstate New York, in why am I forgetting this? In Rockland County, where I again knew nobody. So I think there was a lot of just this theme in my life of just kind of having to really be a warrior, and like having to be strong in my faith, and just trying to keep the spiritual and frankly emotional health of just like, asserting myself as an adult now. And so I think that when I look back, a lot of the playing, which by the way, my keyboard playing was heavily influenced by a band called Children of Bodom. Have you ever heard of them? No? Okay. So Children of Bodom, just to give them a little shout out, they're or were, I should say, a Finnish melodic death metal band that, I mean, listen, kind of like I mentioned before, what my mindset was in high school. They became super famous, super young, and like their whole like gimmick was like, we're gonna get super trash on stage and also play the most ridiculously hardcore and complicated music you've ever heard. Going to have these crushing, insane solo battles between guitar and keyboard. Going to not just be like metal, but like when I say melodic, like they had vibes from like blues and jazz and so many different influences. I mean, for me, it's just kind of, I was just listening. I don't frankly listen to that kind of music that much anymore, but I just found myself listening to them again yesterday because it's like, it's just, in my opinion, some fun music to listen to. But I think also to give you a sense of like, the overall mindset of playing was like, I was going into college, kind of the party mindset, and like this was just a band that just like went so hard in how they played, but also, went so hard in how they were partying. And I think when my mindset shifted to being someone who was a little bit more like, okay, introspective, growth oriented, and kind of on the trajectory that I'm on today as like a husband and father of two, and quite an unlikely frontman of a metalcore act. But how my faith has influenced my music is that for me, my faith is everything, and well, more than my faith, it's my connection with Hashem that is everything, and I really feel like, and this is maybe a broader conversation which we don't need to go into, but it's like what a person views about God or what a person views about the universe, they don't believe in God or whatever one believes completely shapes the reality that they experience. Completely. So if you believe in there's a God, but you don't believe in such positive things about who that God is, I mean, that is tragically going to be not the most empowering existence. And on the flip side, you see, especially in the news, like anytime someone in a religious community gets busted for doing X or Y or Z, it's like there's so much about, I think, modern religion. I mean, I'm not going to speak about religion. Let's talk about Judaism. There's so much about, I don't know other religions. There's so much about even modern Judaism that has lost the idea of like, it's all about Hashem. This is all about like everything I do should resonate with prayer, with literally being a prayer, with becoming like being in a state of becoming closer with my ultimate self, with my higher sense of self, with the ultimate self that is the ultimate source of reality and the ultimate source of love, of kindness, of giving, which is who we believe Hashem to be, just the ultimate source, the ultimate emanation of that which we experience in the day to day. And everything, who am I? I am a projection of Hashem's intention, as are you, as is this desk I'm sitting at. And so like that is what I believe this world to be. And I think specifically I've felt in my life so much of why I was disassociated with religion, again, aside from the fact that last thing as a high school kid I was interested in, I just never, like when I found out a lot of the empowering ideas about Hashem that I learned, I was frankly very shocked because growing up K through 12 with this type of Jewish education, I never knew that there was like real authenticity and like cleaving to God and like so through my music, a lot of what I'm trying to do is like heal the perspective that people have of Hashem in a way that can have them be more emotionally healthy and spiritually healthy. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but does that answer your question?
No, absolutely, that does. That actually reminds me of a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Man is made by his beliefs, as he believes, so he becomes.
Totally. I mean, that's the same with the secret law of attraction. It's like it permeates across a lot of different spiritual systems and whatnot. Like just in Judaism, we call it hishtadlut. Hishtadlut basically means you know um, doing the actions that generate a certain result in your life. Like, meaning, there's one thing to believe in God, there's another thing to lay in bed and say, God's going to give me, I believe in you, God, you're going to give me $1 million. I know it's true. It's like, no, you have to do your hishtadlut. You have to get up and you have to kind of attract, you have to like be the prayer. You can't just, prayer isn't something passive. And interestingly, the word for prayer in Hebrew is mitpalel. Mitpalel is a reflexive verb. Reflexive meaning to affect oneself. So interestingly, prayer is actually not so much an act, from the Jewish perspective, an act of like influencing something outside of myself. More, it's actually a reflexive verb of opening myself up to that which I can become and that which I can attract in my life.
Is there any song that you've written that's particularly meaningful to you?
So the namesake of the album, Dvekas in the Darkness, that's meaningful for sure from a music perspective because my rabbi told me my first song wasn't heavy enough. So I love it. No, I showed it to him and he's like, well, what are you trying to do? I said, well, I guess, I'm really trying to like awaken the sleeping souls out there. And he's like, that's really what you're trying to do. You're going to have to kind of crank it up a notch. I was like, whoa, okay, that's not really the reaction I expected in showing you this project I've been working on for the past few months. But okay, so I think in a lot of ways, Dvekas in the Darkness was like a way for me to like really crank it up in terms of just heaviness and intensity, in terms and just like I combined influences from Children of Bodom, from the guitar solos to some of the licks inside, to the main riff being heavily reminiscent, I think, of Disturbed, which is a band I've always been really into as well.
Down with the sickness.
I mean, I happen to think it's yeah, but like I never realized this because I knew these lyrics since I was in like sixth grade. But what does down with the sickness means? I mean, I think it's so much about what I actually look up to someone like David Draymond for, is that he is, while his music is like new metal or hardcore or whatever blend of genre you want to call it, he's very and always has been unilaterally focused on mental health. And for me, that's also been a very big inspiration because what does down with the sickness mean? And I mean, from my understanding, it means just like come to reckoning and face up to the fact that there is a sickness, there is a darkness, there is something within me, within us all, that we all have to address, and we all have to be better people, to be better humans. We have to kind of address and get down with our sickness before we can even start to grow as a person. You have to admit that it's there. And so anyway, just on that on that little reference, but so back to the song Dvekas in the Darkness. So Dvekas is a word that comes from Jewish mysticism specifically, that largely refers to attachment to Hashem, like literally just cleaving to Hashem, as a very like mystical and meditative connotations as well. But for me, I think it was a kind of a beautiful, when I came up with that name, I was like, not only does it sound like the cool name for a metal song or /album, but also it's, I think, a great expression of what I feel like the journey of being what I view myself as Hashem's warrior to have been, is that the spiritual soldier goes through the ups and downs and the grit of life, and they have to be able to not just like be resilient, but be going towards something. And that's what Dveikus is for me. Dveikus is the cleaving of going towards Hashem, going towards my true self, my best self, and so that's really what Dveikus means. And probably my favorite, perhaps maybe my favorite verse and writing within Dveikus in the darkness is the idea of becoming the reverb within my cry. And this is another idea that I think is rooted, which is rooted heavily in Jewish mysticism, in Hasidic thought, which is the idea of being a prayer. And to go back to like what I said, how mitpalel, to be mitpalel, is a reflexive verb. Being a state of prayer, praying is not what it's all about from the kind of old school traditional Jewish perspective. It's like actually through my actions, through my living, through my generating and everything I do, being a product of my intention and being willfully of contribution to the world. And I mean, as it says in the Torah itself, being a light unto the nations, being someone who can bring light into a world that is full of darkness, to bring fixing to a world that is broken. And I mean, that is frankly, the Jewish creation story is from a mystical perspective, is that before there was anything, all that there was endless light. Hashem, as a completely transcendent being, is in a state of static perfection. But how do you be completely perfect? You're not just being perfect. To be completely perfect, you'd have to be able to become perfect as well. So we call that, the static perfection and dynamic perfection. These are terms coined, by the way, by a rabbi named Rabbi David Aaron, who's like my guru. I consider myself a total student of his. But this world is the expression of Hashem becoming perfect. And by us choosing good in the face of evil, us choosing authenticity in the face of superficiality, that is us like literally living Hashem in this world and bringing transcendent perfection into a world that is, again, created broken so that it can achieve. This is the world of achieving. So our collective selves, me, you, everybody, are this entire world, the collective of Hashem's immanent existence within the world. And if you want to Google a fun word, it's panentheism. So panentheism, not pantheism, it's P-A-N-E-N theism, is what Judaism truly is as a religion, not true monotheism, with the difference being panentheism believes in a transcendent God who paradoxically is one and exists at the same time as an immanent God. So God is both within me and beyond me, paradoxically within this world, beyond this world. And that is what panentheism is. And that's what the Jewish belief is. And I know I've kind of gone on a little bit of a tangent here, but when it said when Hashem created the world and all was endless light, he created these vessels to be able to hold the light, with vessels just being an analogy for us and for this world itself. And when he tried to create it, the vessels broke. And this entire world and existence that we're living in, there's a Kabbalistic phrase that goes, L'shem yichud kutshabrichu ushchinte, which is a phrase that is from Kabbalistic tradition, what one would say before doing a mitzvah or a good deed. And what that basically means is for the sake of the rectification of this broken universe. And like that is really the end goal. And that is really, I think, a deep spiritual awareness that for me has been very empowering, that I think is perhaps I've found through heavy metal, through metalcore, a new language and being able to teach this to, frankly, a new audience that's never heard. I mean, heck, if I went to Jewish private school from K through 12 and never learned this, yeah, you better believe that your average, anyone else has not, didn't learn this either. So like for me, this is a lot of the product of my own spiritual search, and just really being able to come to reckoning with like, what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be a Jew? And like, what is my role here in this world? And that I think is what I try to empower through my music, is that we all have a role in this. You know, the in Judaism, the end goal is not, you know, in a post-messianic Jewish utopia, it's not a world of everyone being Jewish. I don't know if anyone thought about that or knew that. I know, and I don't know enough about other religions, so I'm not going to name any religions. But from what I understand, some religions believe in a post-messianic world, everyone will be X. That's not the case with Judaism. With Judaism, there is the Jewish path, which is a higher responsibility of 613 commandments, which is pretty hardcore, yes. However, most of those commandments, by the way, are inapplicable outside of temple times, when we don't have as many of them are related to the temple service. But for a non-Jewish person to have a relationship with God, the Torah does not say you have to be Jewish to have a relationship with Hashem. In fact, there are the 7 Noahide laws, which are just basic kind of ethical, spiritual principles. Don't kill, don't steal, don't eat a limb off a live animal. A lot of things that we take for granted, like, why would I do that? But, you know, they're that 7 spiritual principles for the entire world outside of the Jewish people, that are just, anyone can have a relationship with God. And it comes, I think, it starts with setting a foundation for oneself in certain just ethical channels that one has to tap into. And if one is able to do that, it happens to be, I just did a podcast with someone who is a Noahide, meaning he is a former preacher, and he is no longer a Christian. He is a Noahide. He as a religion keeps the 7 Noahide laws, and which is interesting. It's not very mainstream, but it's picking up a little. And I guess why am I even going on this tangent is, I guess what I'm just trying to say is, like, what I love about what I'm trying to do with my music is not about, hey, like, be Jewish so that you can have a connection with Hashem. It's like, no, be human and tap into some basic spiritual understandings about the universe, and then you'll have a connection and relationship with Hashem, regardless of who you are, where you're from.
I mean, that's a good point. Judaism's one of the few religions that doesn't proselytize to people.
Yeah, it's totally not part of our ideology that one even needs to be Jewish to have the relationship with God. And so I think that is kind of goes in hand with, like, it's just and interestingly, in the temple times, going back millennia, when we had our temple, there was an entire very large sanctuary that within the temple, what it's called, but I believe it was a sanctuary for the nations. It was a place where anybody could come in prayer to Hashem, and it was regardless of background, religion, whatever. So it just interestingly, in, like, you could say, the heyday of Jewish history in Israel 2,000-3,000 years ago, our temple was not a temple that was exclusive for Jews. It was a place of connection to God for all of mankind and anyone who wanted.
That's pretty cool. So would you say that one of the roles that music has played in your faith is that it's sort of like a prayer, or what are other roles it's played?
Totally. And in fact, I mean, my first song, which is called From This War, is completely templated after, and most of my music is templated after Psalms. You know, Psalms are, from the Jewish point of view, and I think even outside of Judaism, I think from other religions that also view the Psalms as holy writings, view them as this, which is like kind of like the go-to when going through trouble in life is like reciting Psalms. I know in Judaism that's the case, and when you look at it, it's like basically what they were kind of like off the cuff, on the fly prayers that King David, in going through the tumultuous life of war, exile, betrayal, coup, trying to being overthrown by his son in his own kingdom. Like he had quite the life, and at every step of the way, he had a different prayer, and that is basically what comprises the book of Psalms. Is kind of like King David's template of prayer to call on God in troubled times. And it kind of interestingly came at a time in my life when I was grappling with like feeling a bit spiritually numb, not necessarily as connected spiritually as I wanted, and also at the same time kind of getting back into like metal. And I remember there's a song by a band called In Flames. You ever heard of them? No? Okay. In Flames also Scandinavian death metal band, probably my second favorite band after Children of Bodom. Um, but they, oh God, what's the song called? It's called, forgetting the name of the song. I like the song, but the whole song kind of goes, starts with like, cut my throat and throw me to the wolves. I'm just too tired to reload. And it's a lot of this like imagery of like, yeah, like, okay, it just keeps getting more and more intense. And then it kind of climaxes with saying, my God, I don't need you. And it's like, I had a moment, I was like, wait a minute. This song could have had the same lyrics and a completely opposite takeaway, people would probably really like it. And it would probably really be a good song too. That was an aha moment for me in making my music of like, wow, like I should try something like this that is like a prayer that is lamenting what I'm going through in life, but instead of like just basically saying, I got this, I don't need you, God, just basically being like, let's use this as a platform for growth and connection with God in my life. And so that's kind of what drew me is like prayer was heavily um part of why I felt like I kind of needed to write a song. And like this didn't start as a music project. This kind of started as like I want to connect to God. And I feel like writing a song would be a good expression of that. And I also feel like the awareness that I was like sitting on at that point in my life, I felt like if I was able to distill that into a song, it would also be very relatable for others who are just kind of in a place of like, I want to have a connection with a higher power. I want to have a connection with the soul of my souls. But where do I even begin? And that's kind of what my song From This War is like, it starts with the words, my heart calls out in the darkness, my tears frozen deep within, trembling with an echo of prayer in my shell of indignation. And it's just like, it's an acknowledgement of just like how much us and our egos and ourselves get in our own way of being our best selves and living a connected life with other people, with the humans, with God, and just being a connected a person who's connected, engaged with their relationships in all senses of the word.
That's pretty cool. Do you have any prayers you'd like to share while you're here today, or anything else you want to talk about?
Good question. I think the prayer that I would like to leave you with that I think is for me very, very meaningful and particularly, I think, poignant, especially in just the digital worlds that we live in today of just such distraction from real life, which is basically a line in my song From This War that goes, stand tall in the face of these false gods, masked in a voice of temptation. Shield me and conceal me from this fight. In this darkness, Hashem, you are my light. And in just the idea, the talk of false gods, I just want to not idol worship, which happens to both be a Jewish commandment as well as one of the Noahide laws of don't bow down to idols, do not have other gods before me. And interestingly, so Rabbi David Aaron, who I mentioned before, one thing that he expounds upon in his book, The Secret Life of God, which I seriously recommend to anyone, regardless of religion or background, it's like absolutely mind blowing. But one of the things that he talks about in the Adam and Eve story is that what was the ultimate temptation and ultimate reason that the serpent used and held over Adam and Eve's heads to entice them to eat of the forbidden fruit? Was it fame, sex, money? No. It was that for you will become like God, and God doesn't want that. That is our ultimate of all of us inner drive, is to feel all powerful, all worth, like the epidemic of self, of worthlessness that I think all of us in a digital age just struggle with, in a literally a reality of just scrolling through other people's lives. Like that's just like what we all do all day. And I think that what Rabbi David was pointing out here is like at the root of, when it says, do not have other gods before me, even yourself and your own ego, our own temptations towards that which is not true with our ultimate self and who Hashem has created us to be, in our best self, that which is not in alignment with our soul and our purpose in this universe, each and every one of us who has a unique mission and purpose here on this planet right now. So when I say stand tall in the face of these false gods masked in a voice of temptation, again, whether it's fame, attention, sex, drugs, rock and roll, right? Like whatever it is that is, like, frankly, the main points of utilization used by Hollywood and the media to draw us in and to bring us into engaging with their content. Like, this is what I believe true idol worship is, and the prohibition of idol worship is just the pursuit of nothingness in a world where you could be connecting with everythingness. And just to kind of cap that off, there was avodah zara, which means avodah, service, of zara, actually a little bit of an ambiguous word. I heard a class that said something fascinating, which zara in Hebrew shares the same grammatical root as the word zarut, which means emptiness. So avodah zara, which is the actual language of the prohibition of idol worship, means the service of emptiness. And I think that that's the existential struggle that all of us, regardless of race, religion, upbringing, doesn't matter what kind of background you live on the wealth spectrum, what country you live in the world, everybody wakes up in the morning and faces the same existential struggle of, am I worth it? Do I have self-worth? Do I matter? And can I express that? And can I be my best self? And I think that that is maybe a prayer that I can just leave this podcast with, is that we should all merit to really find authenticity in our pursuits and really cleave to that which is our calling in this world and what we are created for, in healing the world, rectifying that which is broken, and ultimately coming together as one people. And collectively, that's actually what there's a word in Judaism called the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is God's immanence. God's immanence is also described in mystical sources. What is God's immanence? It is the unity of mankind. It is like, so when we say, oh, world peace, isn't just like some nice pop culture buzzword. Like, that's really why we're here. And that's really kind of to be able to become one and to, like I said before, to kind of like just bring unity to this world, which is the ultimate Jewish prayer, the prayer that a Jew is supposed to say before they die, the last words that leave their lips, is Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one. And the end of that sentence is not there is one God, it is Hashem is one. All is one. If we can all really come together and look past our physical differences, and so much about what the media likes to point out about that which divides us, and realize that there's something that is within us, beneath the surface, that unites us all, a spark, a light, a soul, that we can all come together and please God with Hashem's help, usher in just a really new age of spiritual connectedness and togetherness that really just um, reveals Hashem's majesty and just the majesty of peace, of getting along, and of being one with one another in this world.
That's actually a really good point. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the movie Amadeus. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but that's like one of my
Uh,
favorite movies. And the name Amadeus has Latin origins, so Ama meaning love, Deus meaning God. So literally it translates to God's love, but the actual meaning of the name is one who is loved by God.
okay.
And a big part of the movie is one of the characters tries so hard to be loved by everyone and to gain the love of God that he ends up going on a journey of emptiness because it's all self-fulfilling because he's trying to pursue what you were talking about earlier, like fame and wealth and recognition rather than actually cultivating a relationship with God.
Yeah, all perceived expressions of becoming gods ourselves.
You can stream the music of Hashem's Warrior on Spotify and other major music streaming platforms.